So let's get into all of this and continue to ask the question, what does this mean for the United States and whether or not we should get involved? Let's bring in our guests, Cameron Kansarinia from the National Union of Democracy in Iran and Heritage Foundation Senior Fellow for China Strategy, Michael Pillsbury. Thank you both for being with us here today.
Thanks.
Let's talk about United States involvement. President Trump is leaving that unclear at the moment, suggests he doesn't want to talk about it. And let's also acknowledge that the United States is already involved. We're playing defensive measures. We have assets and military personnel stationed there. I think the question, Michael, that I have to ask is this way. Is it unavoidable? Like, does the spiral of warfare and the level of involvement the United States has already committed to this war inevitably result in greater involvement for the United States?
No. In the study of wars and their causes, Will, there's always a chance people often look back when some kind of a spiraling escalation takes place. They'll look back and try to see the moment when it could be averted. Right now, the U.S. can claim accurately, and President Trump is doing a great job at this, minimizing our own involvement. We're helping to defend against missile attacks and drone attacks against Israeli citizens, but we're not participating directly in the bombing. Now, that escalation step is very close because the media now knows over the last couple of days around the world that this Fordo site is where the uranium fuel is. It's really deep, and only U.S. B-2 bombers with this 30,000 pound deep penetrating warhead, only that combination can take out this site. So that's the next step of escalation, which I would say is a probably 60%, 70% chance of doing it, because otherwise these strikes can go on for two more weeks or more. And that does not give a chance for Iranian politics to take place, to try to overthrow the Ayatollah, change the regime. People are not going to come out in the streets, Will, now and fight to change the regime when they have a chance of being bombed in the process. So I think escalation can be slowed down. I think that's what President Trump is trying to do so far.
Okay, let's pursue that for one moment. This idea, which I think is an honest assessment that not many are willing to say out loud, although I think it's being said from Israel, that the goal of this is not just to denuclearize Iran, but to actually change the regime in Iran. Cameron, how does that play out? Do you agree that is the unstated goal, or stated in some corners, but that is the goal of this in the end? And I'm curious how you see that playing out if everyone is trying to effectuate regime change in Iran.
Well, Will, it's a pleasure to be with you and with your fellow guests and viewers. I think that is the goal based on what we've seen from public statements from Israeli officials. And I think that the reason that they're so clear in those statements is because it's not something that Israel is looking to impose on Iran. If you look at the past 10 to 15 years of Iranian history, you have seen uprising after uprising. You have seen the Iranian people come to the streets multiple times, very overtly. They're not asking for reform. They're not asking for slight changes. They're not asking for a smiling cleric instead of a scowling cleric. They're asking for removal of the Islamic Republic. And so what we're seeing right now is not only attacking nuclear facilities, but the regime's repression and suppression apparatus, which could make regime change more possible by the people of Iran themselves.
Really quickly, Cameron, as a follow-up, describe what that looks like, the events that you would anticipate would be required to see the Iranian people step up and then internally force regime change in Iran.
Well, it was just mentioned, one factor that's very prevalent on the ground right now, as you can imagine, is fear. When you have explosions, when you have missiles, when you have F-35s flying overhead, there is an atmosphere of fear. One thing that will contribute to reducing that fear is partially what Israel is doing right now, which is specifically targeting the regime's repression apparatus. The Islamic Republic has bought technology from the Chinese Communist Party to identify those who go to the streets and protest by knocking those offline, by, as Israel did today, going after the state propaganda network, the IRIB, which broadcasts forced confessions of innocent protesters and victims. So if the fear level in Iran comes down, I think what you'll see is nationwide protests, particularly in the capital of Tehran, which will lead to regime change by the people of Iran themselves. And after that, you will see a transitional leadership. There are folks like the exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, who has offered himself as a transitional leader for a period of time until you oversee free elections. And I think hopefully in a minute. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm going to put that as a final question to Michael. I think it's the question that we did not answer. We didn't answer it well, honestly, in Afghanistan. We didn't answer it well in Iraq. And we should be already trying to answer that question here today. If the goal is open and honest, as the conversation the three of us have had here today, to change the regime in Iran in a way that hopefully does not demand United States military action, or at least boots on the ground for American soldiers, what comes after the Ayatollah? Like, we have to consider that. Is it worse? Is it better? Is it chaos? What comes after this regime in Iran, Michael?
Well, the danger, as you point out in your first three questions, Will, is the regime change process is not something the U.S. Army is very good at. We didn't do it very well in Iraq. We don't have an exile government for Iran that can just be flown in and take over. And we have this global propaganda from China that this is America's war, that we're the bully. They're trying to tell the 4 billion people, Will, of the so-called global South, that this is already an American war. I think we want to avoid that. The Crown Prince is a very solid citizen. I've met him here in Washington many times, but he doesn't have a full exile government of 1,000 people ready to go. And we're just not that good at regime change. And what comes after, Will, as everybody knows by now.
Right. And so we might consider that competency level when we talk about that being the end game of this entire enterprise. Can we accomplish our stated goal when it comes to regime change? It's a deep conversation, one that has to continue not just in the days, but in the weeks ahead. Cameron, Michael, thanks for starting it here today with me.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.